How's it going, Andrew?
Hey, Matt.
We're back again. Episode number 6.
Episode number 6. We're here talking about masonry and having some fellowship again. It's nice to be back. I always look forward to our recording days because it's kind of fun to try to think about topics for shows and come up with, new and fun ideas that, keep us inspired. And, it's a lot of fun. I've been enjoying the heck out of this.
Yeah, this has been a super interesting process and journey so far. I mean, we definitely get to explore our own opinions on stuff further and our own thoughts and feelings on stuff further than perhaps we have before. But a lot of these are conversations we've had a couple times before. But what have you been up to?
Man, I had a kind of a fun experience. Last night I was going around with some buddies, and I ended up on accident without realizing. They were like, let's go to Puddler's Hall.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, fancy this. Puddler's Hall is where our lodge was actually founded, a little historical bar stop. And it has cool stuff in there. Like, for example, on the wall, it has something that I don't know if it's Masonic, because I know it's tied to unions as well in the 8-hour workday, where it says 8 hours for work, 8 hours for... What is it? 8 hours for work, 8 hours for
sleep, and 8 hours for what you will is what their 3 signs say. And I mean, it does have a Masonic undertone, whether they know it or not, and whether, it was meant to be a union thing or not. It's interesting that it's in the pub that our lodge started in 151 years ago. Well,
and you know why? It's interesting because one of the actual groundbreaking battles for the 8-hour workday happened right across, down the block at the... I forget where it was, but they were up on the hill there where there used to be like a factory of some sort, and they were fighting for the 8-hour workday. And it's interesting to note that the unions met in that building as well as the lodge. So I wouldn't be surprised knowing that a lot of the original members of our lodge were wrought iron workers, that there could have been a little cross-pollination there.
I'm sure there was a little cross-pollination there. That's pretty awesome. It makes Puddler's a very unique location in Milwaukee, for sure. If you're in the Milwaukee area or you're ever down this way, it's definitely a place to stop in.
You know what else was interesting? I was leaving the pub, and I was talking to this woman outside who was like having a cigarette, and I was like, oh yeah. She's like, you like Puddler's? And I said, yeah, my lodge was found here. She goes, my grandfather was a member of that lodge.
Oh, wow.
She goes, can I show you something? And I go, sure. And she pulls up on her phone some pieces of his regalia. It was like medals, and he has a past master medal and a high priest medal.
Oh, wow.
So I think when we're done here, I'm going to go out and see if I can find him on the wall up there, because I think it's Letterman might have been his last name. And if he had a past master's pin from Lake Lodge, he should be up there.
Right. Wow, that's a small world right there, right?
Yeah, and just right at Puddler's Hall.
All right. Well, you think we should get this thing started?
Let's do it.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Wow.
Ooh, love that opening every time. So I think we had said that we were going to talk about a topic we've teased our listeners with a couple times today. And it's a pretty hot topic in Masonry, and I know both you and I have some strong stances on it. So let's do it. Let's talk about social media.
Let's talk about what has been such a back and forth, kind of no one knows how to handle it. There's a push for it. There's a push against it, for how Masons should use social media and how a Mason should behave on social media. I think would be two areas that'd be interesting to delve into. It's kind of like we can kind of examine some of the pros and cons, and I think it's going to be an important topic because as we're Masons trying to stay relevant, which I know our past Grandmaster talked about a lot during his year, was staying relevant and being relevant through a lot of our works, but it also means being in the public eye in a way that is, positive for the fraternity. And I think there's a lot of power within that, and there's a lot of ability to also not be so good too. So I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword that we are kind of playing with fire with, and I think it's important to understand how to use it and how not to use it.
Well, and I mean, even to just take it out of the context of Freemasonry, right? I think social media is something that is so new to humans and so different than anything we've had in our lives before, as so many technologies are now, that we're still learning how to just navigate it, period. Like, people in general are trying to, learn to subdue their passions and speak appropriately to people on social media when you have the ability of anonymity and no consequences in a lot of cases for whatever you do say, and just this open forum where you can, for the most part, say whatever you want without having to worry about serious repercussions most of the time. And it's, a lot of very divisive topics get brought up on there, and it can bring out the worst in people, but it can also bring out the best in people and be a very useful tool.
It is a tool that can help bring people together like they've never been brought together before, but it can also serve as a thing that can tear brothers apart between one another too, because when you are sharing with certain information between brethren, you can say stuff on social media you would never say face-to-face to someone in a lodge, and then it can cause tension or even anger or fights between people based on how people conduct themselves. So I think let's start with the nice stuff first, and let's talk about how every lodge, if able to, and if their culture allows, can use social media as an asset to promote their lodge and to try to get in the face of especially younger people through the use of social media.
Well, and so that becomes an interesting topic in and of itself. Facebook has become the medium for us old guys, who were around, who were young and interested in it when it first came out 20 years ago now at this point.
Yep.
And it's kind of a scary thought to see that these kids are moving on to other platforms, because Facebook's the one that I'm most familiar with when it comes to administering a page or anything like that. I'm trying to become familiar with TikTok, but as a lodge, how do you do TikTok content? Because TikTok content's different.
It's interesting because when you think about it, Facebook is now for people in their 30s, 40s, and up. And so it is become an older social media. And a lot of younger people are on Instagram, Twitter to a certain extent. That's getting a little complicated right now. And on TikTok. And Facebook is nice in the way that it allows you to build a page that can actually advertise a business. And, I'm not saying Masonry is strictly a business, but it kind of functions like one on Facebook, where it's promoting its events, what it does, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. You fall into that category because it's not a personal page. So, when you think about it, it is ultimately a business. You're advertising what you're doing. You may not be advertising a good or a service, but you're certainly advertising what you're doing and the fraternity itself. And Facebook's a great medium for that type of content. So is Instagram, and we're trying to reach out to younger people through social media. And like I said, TikTok would be hard for a lodge to do content on. So I think if we're going to talk about the pros and administering it as a lodge, like having a lodge page, I think we should focus on Facebook and Instagram.
I think Facebook and Instagram, let's focus on them at the start, and then we kind of circle back. I think there are actually some ways we can use TikTok that we can talk through. But let's start with Facebook. I would strongly argue myself, and maybe I'm biased, as the chairman of the social media committee of information spreading at Lake Lodge. I like to add more titles to my name. As that person, I'm pretty biased, and I like building the Facebook page. Our Facebook page is... Hold on, let me check how many viewers we got right now. When I first took it over, it had 100 followers. We now have over 500. And what that allows you to do is really, one, help stay people organized on your events and promote events, which we've talked about in the past. Two, it allows you to share news so that even if members aren't visiting Lodge, it kind of serves a dual function. And I highly recommend every Lodge have a Facebook page. And in the title of that page, put the word Freemasons, not just your lodge number, so that people know what you are. And it serves a dual function for me. On one hand, I've had so many leads come to our lodge for potential candidates who've reached out on Facebook and said, hey, I'm reaching out because your lodge looks so active and alive, and some of these other ones, I'm not sure if they're even meeting. So the whole purpose of your page is to show life in a form of, hey, look what we're doing. Look at our events. Look at how much fun we're having. Look at how many people we have here. And it actually is super helpful because it gives the appearance of a small glimpse of what it's like to be within the lodge. And that can be helpful for not only the public, but actually it can serve to bring people back into lodge who maybe haven't been there in a while when they see how much is going on.
Agreed. And, you and I talked early on into you taking over the administrator role of that Facebook page, and I had a little bit of experience managing a Facebook page back from the Hog Rally. And, if you want to keep, your page isn't going to show up on people's news feeds unless you're posting at least once a week.
Mm-hmm.
The algorithm that all these companies use now to decide what makes it into people's news feed is all dependent on activity. If you're not being active and you're posting once every 3 months, nobody's ever going to see your post unless they go looking for it.
And another good reminder, I do want to add to this conversation on Facebook, as a Facebook user who follows lodge Facebook pages, whether it's Wisconsin Freemasonry, which has their Facebook page, the Masonic Wisconsin Foundation, Lake Lodge, every lodge that currently has a page, on top of being active, which I would say if you're going to have a Facebook page, make it a goal to post once a week, like you just said. And if you don't have any new news, just find something Masonic to post. If I had a nickel for every Masonic quote that I posted just to do something on that week to keep it in people's feeds and in people's consciousness, I'd have like 10 nickels. And at the same time, I think when you do that, as somebody who's on the page, make sure, and you guys, I've been trying to beat this drum at my own lodge, when you see Masons posting stuff on their lodge pages, just like it every time, because the more people like it, the more it spreads to the actual public. So something you can do as just a Facebook user is like other lodges or your lodge's stuff. And I do that. When I go through Facebook, I like almost every single Masonic post. We have a guy who's on our lodge, who's not even a member of a lodge, who shares every single one of our posts.
And he does that for like every lodge. It's impressive. And that's the kind of support that these pages need. You need to be sharing that information. Right? The whole point of us having lodge pages and stuff on Facebook is to get ourselves out there in the public eye, which, kind of leads me into the question of, should we have lodge Facebook pages and stuff? And I sit in the camp of yes, of course, because it's a great way to promote what you're doing and, maybe get people interested in it. But, if nobody's sharing your post, nobody's liking your post, again, the algorithm is not going to show it to anybody. And part of the purpose of social media is to be able to reach an audience that you may have been unable to reach before.
Correct. And I think as a collective unit, if Masons all acted in tandem together to support these types of pages, it could have a huge impact on the spread of this information about what Masonry is. It's basically free advertisement, to be honest. And if it's free, why not use it? And also, if you are interested, I know our Grand Lodge has recently started investigating giving, I think it's matching grants for advertising.
No, that's for physical advertising.
Physical ads.
Signs outside your lodge building and stuff is that matching grant program. It's not for, as far as I know, there isn't one for like online advertising.
All right. Well, then, to my Grand Lodge buddies, could be cool. But either way, advertising on social media, if you actually had a budget within your lodge, let's say, for example, they actually, for a very low amount of money, if you have events in the public, you can spend up to like $5 to $10 to hit 500 to 600 people. And you can actually spread that information with a small advertising budget, which I know some lodges around the state I've heard have started to put that in their budgets to say, hey, let's just have a little bit of money set aside just to really push those events that we really want to get out into the public.
We're going to be doing a small advertising budget next year. If I'm elected and my budget's approved, I did build in a budget for advertising on social media.
And I think this is a good way that we can stay relevant as Freemasons, is making sure that we've been trying to find our way to, as Masonry has through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, stay relevant within the time that it's currently in. And I think every business that is a reputable business has social media presence. So on Facebook, what you primarily use it for is sharing news and also promoting events and keeping a base of viewership within your lodge, members of your lodge, and the general public. Instagram, a lot of the time, isn't as good for sharing events, but it is very good for sharing news. So this is pictures. You're sharing pictures, and you'll find that that'll reach a lot more of a younger crowd. And I know that some people who might be listening might not be as familiar with using social media, and I just want to give you one recommendation. It's called YouTube Academy. And you know what that means? If you go on YouTube and just Google, or I guess it's not called Google, do a search and say how to run a business page for Facebook or Instagram, you'll find countless videos that can actually make this very easy and use some easy strategies that I would highly recommend. If you know anyone who's maybe a little younger in your lodge who's been sitting on the sidelines, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, we're trying to get a social media presence. Would you be interested in trying to help learn this process and help give us a boost? And honestly, I love doing social media stuff. I will warn you that once you find out that you're good at it, I am managing, how many pages? 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 different pages, 4 of them Masonic that I oversee.
I only have 3. So,
but it's honestly a useful tool, and I can't recommend it enough. And I'd like to hear from you listeners. If you want to email us in at timeforfellowship@gmail.com, let us know what your opinions are on social media and what kind of responses you felt like. What have you enjoyed about it, and what has irked you or made you a little bit upset about it?
So before we move on to different things when it comes to like behavior and posting stuff on personal accounts, let's say on Facebook, when you represent yourself as a Mason, I'm interested to hear, as a TikTok content creator myself, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on how a lodge could utilize TikTok, because it's very much an individual platform. And for those people who haven't been on TikTok or aren't familiar with it, it's strictly a video platform. There's really not much for text that you can do with anything. It's pretty much strictly videos, usually somewhere between 15 seconds and 3 minutes. You can go up to 10 minutes, but those are really long videos to sit there and watch.
I think what I'd be interested in seeing, if someone at the lodge would be willing to take it, is I think this would be similar to Instagram, but in a video format of sharing information about what's going on at the lodge. You could easily do videos of you standing in an event and be like, hi, I'm here at the spaghetti dinner. Check this out. We got all this cool stuff. Masonry is about ABC, and do light plugs and information on Masonry within the context of also sharing and advertising for your lodge. It is the weirdest new frontier, and I think it is going to require some creativity to figure out how we can implement that for a lodge use, but it is where all the younger people are. And if we're going to stay relevant, we need to find a way to interact with that platform to get in front of those people, especially when on that platform there's so much misinformation about Masonry. It'd be nice to have some light being spread too.
Right, and there's a lot of individual Masons that are doing individual content on TikTok, but I haven't really seen, outside of the museum, like the Michigan Masonic Museum, they have a TikTok account, they post videos, stuff like that, but I haven't seen a lodge utilize it yet. So
it's kind of a new frontier, and I wonder if anyone would have suggestions on ideas for using that. There also is some fear around TikTok because the algorithm isn't as controlled, whereas on Facebook, you're probably usually going to be bleeding into your local, right next to you community. So it's a little bit safer, whereas there is some concern because there's a lot of crazy people in this world, and on TikTok, it can get spread in front of people that you potentially don't really want to have your lodge's information, which can kind of be a little bit scary. I guess that's just from my perspective.
You run into that issue with any form of social media, though. And, I mean, any sort of... You could run into that hanging a flyer in a grocery store, to be quite honest.
I guess that's fair.
You never know what person is going to see that. So...
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I do think that I agree that I like what the Michigan Masonic Museum is doing, where they just go around and they're showing off their artifacts and their things and talking about Masonry. I do think it would serve, like, a lot of local brothers we know, a handful I know. My Freemasons is one of the TikTok pages that a brother in Wisconsin uses. You've been doing a lot of stuff.
Archer Mason.
At Archer Mason, where a lot of it is just talking about what Freemasonry is. And I honestly think that still serves a beneficial purpose as long as you're doing it in a way that isn't divisive and is a way that is spreading light. I think that is super helpful and useful to get Freemasonry in front of the eyes of young people, even if it's not directly advertising your lodge, it's advertising for the craft. And if done correctly in a way that, actually can maybe get it in front of the eyes in a positive way in front of younger people, that's a great way to maybe increase interest too.
I agree, and I think you just segued us into our next topic here. This one's the hard one.
Don't be mad at us.
To discuss. I want to preface it by saying, by no means at any point during this, because we both kind of know how each other feel about this, by no means at any point during this are we saying you should not be able to post whatever you want on your social media platform.
We're not talking about trying to silence or control people's freedom of speech. I want to make that very, very clear.
Right. Want to be upfront about that.
What we're going to talk about here is how one should present themselves while still using that freedom too.
So, you're right. And I'm going to preface that with, if you have ever posted a picture of yourself in Masonic regalia, or any sort of thing that has a square and compass, or you share Masonic posts, or anything like that on social media, guess what? You just made yourself a public face of the fraternity, whether you intended to or not. If somebody who is not a Mason sees that and takes issue with or really enjoys your content, they're going to connect you with Freemasonry because you have presented yourself as such.
Correct. And I think there's a two-tiered system here. If you are presenting yourself as a Freemason on social media, there is, within the Grand Lodge's code, a certain level of conduct that they even promote in there that if you haven't read it, you should be aware of.
I'm pretty sure almost every grand jurisdiction has adopted a social media policy at this point.
And I just kind of want to talk about how a Mason should conduct themselves on social media in a Masonic way. And with the preface that we're not talking about saying don't post, don't express your feelings about things, don't do stuff, I kind of want us to talk about how you need to be conscious as a Mason, one, how what you say may reflect on the entire fraternity, and two, how what you say might affect and cause disharmony between brethren based on how you choose to word things that you post.
Or even may scare somebody off or encourage somebody, depending on the way the post goes, to become a member of the fraternity or not become a member of the fraternity. I think the key topic to hit on, it kind of jumps back to one of our earlier episodes about civility, is there is a way to present your position, defend your position, and defend your opinions and thoughts without being derogatory towards other people. And I think that's where the problem comes in. And we're talking about social media where you have a very short window to express what you're trying to say, whether it be in text or video form or just a photo meme. And sure, sometimes that stuff, you might just find it funny, and it may be intended to be a joke, but that doesn't mean it can't be misconstrued. And I think you have to be very careful about posting anything that has any sort of derogatory terms on it, and I don't care which side of the aisle you sit on or which opinion you're taking on something. If you are posting something that, in order to further your opinion, degrades the other part of that conversation, that doesn't look very Masonic to me.
Yeah, it's like we all, as Masons, we're not going to all agree on everything. We're not all of like mind, but we have enough commonality and respect for one another to say, hey, if, for example, let's just say we're talking about politics online, and we're not going to take any stance on this because that's not really what this is about, because I've seen egregious errors coming from both sides of the aisles.
We'll just do side A and side B.
So if side A comes in and puts a post about something about side B and goes, look at these clowns, what idiots, like, I can't believe they would be such terrible people, side B will feel, as a brother, attacked because it's not a civil way to have that conversation. Whereas, let's say, for example, side A goes, I saw this recent policy that they did. I don't think that this is a good idea because of ABC. I would think that we need to focus on C, D, D, or whatever you want to say. It is not a problem that you're disagreeing or showing disagreement. It's the way that you say it is taking someone down in the process.
You can disagree without being disagreeable. Thank you for that one, Jim.
That's a great way to put it. And I think, think about this. When you post something on Facebook, it might be helpful to think, how would you feel if that same post was put up on annual communication on a big screen? Would you still be like, dude, that joke about that really inappropriate joke that I posted publicly is now in front of everyone? Would you be like, yeah, dude, that's awesome? Or would you be like, oh, that's kind of embarrassing? Because sometimes I'll see posts that are like, it's like the dirtiest joke I've ever seen, and there's a square and compass next to it. I just go, oh my God.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is sometimes, some of the things I see posted by Masons and people that, I know to be Masons, not necessarily because I know them personally, but because I've, seen them on social media and they present themselves as a Mason. They make me cringe, and I am a Mason. I can only imagine what somebody from outside the fraternity is thinking if they come across that.
And when you're on social media and you present yourself as a Mason, there might be people who see that, and that's the only connection they have to the fraternity. And if it's divisive, disagreeable, or gross, that reflects directly on the fraternity. And that could make someone be like, they let these types of people in. And that's not saying that you can't have a sense of humor and enjoy certain types of jokes. But you have to remember, if you're in mixed company, if you make a racist joke online, it looks horrible. And you might be like, well, what's defined as racism? And you're like, I think we all know when you feel that you're like, this joke is getting to a little close to the edge. And you're like, it really is not appropriate for the entire public to kind of have that. And it can actually cause fights between brethren, and it can cause very uncomfortable situations. And a lot of the times I've seen these things that the brothers who would post something like this, I could never imagine them saying this in person or in real life. It's somehow when they get behind a keyboard, they feel justified in sharing heinous things. And you're like, guys, just remember, this is such a powerful tool and it needs to be treated with respect. And once again, I'm not saying you shouldn't have the freedom to speak, but I think it is wise and prudent advice. It's wise and prudent advice to try to circumscribe your passions and try to make sure that you're putting your best version of yourself forward.
Well, yeah, and like I said, if you have chosen to put a picture of a square and compass ever up on your profile or anything Masonic on your page or in your TikTok feed or any videos or anything like that, anything to do with Freemasonry now, people are going to associate you with the fraternity. And we constantly harp on, especially to the naysayers, that we give good men the tools to make themselves better. And if that is not the public face that we are showing through our actions or through our words on social media or through our videos, then we're not representing the fraternity correctly. And you and I have had at length discussions about this, especially when it comes to TikTok, where people seem to like the idea of constantly arguing with the conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, and sometimes get a little derogatory and not civil with their responses to these guys. And I understand it gets under all of our skin, and none of us are perfect, and sometimes we're going to have the wrong reaction and say something in the heat of the moment. Totally understood. But that is just going to give that person more credibility for what they're saying about the fraternity if we are not presenting ourselves as what we claim to be.
And the only way that Masons are going to really show, and honestly, it's a good lesson to the way you interact on social media, because it kind of reflects on how you feel comfortable acting in the real world, is, are you acting like a Mason at all times? And I think that when people believe that I'm only a Mason when I walk in the doors of the lodge, when I'm in the lodge, I try to avoid very divisive conversations. I try not to make people uncomfortable. I try to meet on the level and give people mutual respect. And then if you go, cool, I'm just going to do that in lodge. And the moment I step out those doors and get in that keyboard, I'm going to throw that out the window and I'm just going to act like a different person. You really, when you're a Mason, you should be a Mason 24/7. And, if that means, in lodge, we're forbidden to talk about religion and politics because it's so divisive. And I wouldn't say online you're forbidden to do that, but it's a good warning to be like, when you're addressing these topics, understand that they are inflammatory. So make sure when you're phrasing your sentences, you're not throwing gasoline onto it. You're actually trying to be sensitive and actually trying to make it a conversation that if your goal is to change someone's mind, you need to put it in a way that doesn't immediately put their barriers up where they're like, you're being mean to me. And you're like, no, but you're like, if it's a serious conversation, it should be had in a way that has mutual respect.
Right.
And there's a quote I wanted to read. I was reading this article by Darren Laners talking about how Masonry needs to attract the younger generation, kind of live up to its promise to have men who are good and men and making them better. And it says, however, this is not going to be the case unless we make wholesale changes to how we act as individual members of the fraternity, how we act as an organization, and how we market ourselves to this generation. And that's hugely impactful because that's what we're talking about here is As an individual, we need to remember that we're Masons and to act Masonic. As an organization, we need to try to, in our laws and rules, live up to the principles of Freemasonry. And when we're marketing it to the public, which if you're on social media, that's what that is, you need to remember that you are a Mason and your Masonry doesn't stop at the door of the lodge.
Agreed. And as great of a point that is to end on right there before we get into news, there is one reminder I want to give everybody. If you are on Facebook and you are typing out responses to somebody, you had mentioned being careful with how you're choosing your phrasing, right? Remember that with text like that, and you're not sitting down and having a conversation with somebody, you don't get to see any facial expressions. You don't get to read that person or what the intent behind that person's response was. All you get is the text. And if it's written in even a slightly aggressive manner, it can be taken way out of context and look terrible. So be careful, choose your words wisely, think about what you're going to say before you say it.
And be civil, be kind, be circumscribed. And remember that all because you're right doesn't mean that the way you do something is always the right way to do it. And so just make sure that all because you're upset that you try to treat everyone, not just brothers, as brothers, because we are living with a brotherhood of man under the, what's the sentence I'm looking for? What am I trying to say?
Under the fatherhood of God.
Yeah, Masonry terms. But yeah, so it's just something to be important to care about. And I know if you guys are mad at us, just send us emails in the civilest way possible. We're very sensitive.
Timefordfellowship@gmail.com. Don't worry, Andrew and I have grown a pretty thick skin. Me especially, being a TikTok content creator, you kind of have to after a while. Obviously, we would love to hear from you guys, and we would love to hear from you civilly. That would be the preferred way to do it if you do disagree with us. Again, we're not telling you to not share your opinions or thoughts on things. We're just telling you to think about the way in which you are presenting them.
This isn't about censorship. This is about being a Mason. Okay, so you want to hear what's going on in Wisconsin?
I do want to hear what's going on in Wisconsin.
All right, I'm going to quickly pause here for a second, and we'll be right back with some news. All right, let's talk about some news. Music start now. So what's been going on in Wisconsin? We got a bunch of good news coming out of the state of Wisconsin. The first news I would like to talk about today is Chetek Lodge has actually finished an event on September 4th where they were supporting Curdy Cares. Chetek Lodge number 277 held a hot dog brat fundraiser event on September 4th for Curdy Cares. It's a nonprofit organization that offers help and hope to the homebound by giving them free rides, running errands for them, and helping where needed at no cost to the participants. So they'd like to give a big thanks to KG's Fresh Food for their use of their food trailer in their parking lot, and Synergy and Chetek for propane. They had hot dogs, brats, and condiments that were brought by the Masonic Brothers, and the buns by Village Hearth to the Czech community to support this fundraiser. So they were able to raise a lot of money for Curdy Cares.
Andrew, I have a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You were born and raised in Wisconsin, correct?
Correct.
It's Chetek.
Chetek. I've never, I'm learning something every day.
All right. Camp Douglas held their annual Hunters Night on September 18th, which is an open to the public event. Tickets include a meal and a ticket for drawings on several rifle, shotguns, sporting-related items, and other prizes. Tickets were also sold during the evening for an opportunity to win a variety of other items and a 50-50 raffle. The annual event went off well. It supports area elementary schools and scholarships for 2 high schools. And based off the pictures, it looks like a good time. I'm going to have to try to make it up to this one of these years.
Dude, when I saw that in the journal, I was thinking the exact same thing. That looked like a lot of fun. So we should make an attempt to get there next year and check it out. Looks like a great fundraiser and a great time.
Always be traveling.
The other event that I wanted to talk about, not event or news, is the Wisconsin Masonic Foundation officially has a new Facebook page.
Woohoo!
This is going to be a great stop if you want to continue to see all the good works that are coming out of Wisconsin charitable acts, especially the Acts of Kindness program. This keeps you up to date on all the kind of news that we're kind of announcing here as far as donations of FSTs and other good charitable works that are happening. Please, if you have not yet, please give them a follow and continue to push for donations to the Acts of Kindness program, which is one of the best programs in Wisconsin. So let's talk about some events. So what's coming up here? So first thing I have on our list here is on November 4th. Actually, let's start with some of the late October stuff first. I got ahead of myself. So you want to tell us about spaghetti since that's today?
Since it is today, if you are listening to this episode on the day it comes out, 10/26, Lake Lodge's annual Spook-Getty dinner is tonight at 5:30 p.m. and goes till about 7. Adults are $10. Ooh. Kids 3 to 5 are $5, and kids under 3 are free. And there'll definitely be buckets of candy for the kids. The lodge is all decorated up, so please stop on by, have some spaghetti, and share some fellowship with us. I know Andrew and I will both be there.
Heck yeah. So what else is going on? On October 30th, District 12 is having its fall meeting. It's going to be at George Washington Lodge, 1776. It starts at 6 p.m. for refreshments, 7 p.m. meeting. If you're in District 12, it's a really great time. It is required for the principal officers, but everyone's invited, and honestly, I try to make it every time they come up. It's a good thing to get aligned with your district.
And a little teaser for that, there's going to be about a 3 to 5 minute education on the Jedi Order tenets and how they relate to the tenets of Freemasonry.
Oh my God. You're not going to want to miss that. Also, we got coming up here on November 4th, the Masonic Day of Light in Eau Claire Masonic Center at 7 a.m. Breakfast and registration is going to start at 7. The lodge opens at 8:30. Reservations need to be in by, you missed it. They should have been on the 23rd. So if you are signed up, make sure that you make it to that event. The Valley of Milwaukee on the same day, which is November 4th, is having their mini reunion, the 16th degree, luncheon and presentation. Other events that we have going on here is going to be the Freeze Fest. I've been talking about on every podcast. Please, if you haven't signed up, it's going to be by H.L. Palmer Lodge, number 301. They are doing it on November 12th from noon to 4 p.m. It's going to be getting some teams together and jumping in an ice bucket.
We need to do a team.
We'll bring that up in Lodge and see if we can get a team out there for you guys to support H.L. Palmer Lodge. It's going to be helping the dyslexia centers. Definitely an event you're not going to want to miss. Other events is Silas Shepherd, 1843, is having their winter and installation event, which is going to be on November 18th at 9 a.m. More information can be found in our lodge as far as the location is concerned. And Damascus Lodge 290 is having their open game night November 28th. It's going to be a lot of fun with a lot of games. That's going to be right here at Lake Masonic Center. More information to come up on that. And last but not least, on February 3rd, there's going to be another Day of Light, which is going to be at the Triple I Shrine. If you need more information, look on the WisconsinMasons.org page. We should have more information on that. But that is what's going on around Wisconsin.
Excellent. I hope everybody has a great day, and I hope that you all enjoyed this episode. And again, if you have any comments in either direction, please feel free to reach out to us at timeforfellowship@gmail.com. And let's start a conversation about stuff.
All right, brothers. I will see you all on the level. Until next time, have a good day.
Take it easy.